I can go to my nice blue sheet that the lady said would not glare. First off, centroids of loads or centroids of areas. Centroid of a triangle, 1/3 base height. Centroid of a rectangle, centroid of a triangle, 1/3 the base. Centroid of a rectangle, half the base. Stuff like that. Finding the centroid of these various loads or areas is going to be necessary so that you can solve for reactions on the beams, so that you can solve for the centroid of the load under a footing, so that you can solve for the centroid of a steel shape, those kind of things. Very basic. The basic equation for all of this stuff, for example, for the rectangle, they fall in a very nice pattern. Base times height. For a triangle, base times height over 2. Next power curve, base times height over 3. And right on down the line. I doubt seriously if they'll get any higher than that, any higher order than that. But we're simply talking about how much volume or how much area is underneath these curves. Centroids work the same way. This guy's centroid is half the base. This guy's centroid is 1/3 of the base. This guy's centroid is 1/4 of the base. And of course those numbers are given by here. One correction I need on that sheet, I just noticed, this is BH over N plus 1. That will surely be the only mistake I find. All right. Now then, Chris, anybody got a question in there? Does anybody look ignorant? No? Good. All right. For example, one of the problems on, I think it was the example quiz, was to replace these loads with a single concentrated load, with 3 concentrated loads, and indicate the points of application. We could, of course, also replace it with a one single load. If that was a footing, those pressures would probably be on the bottom of the thing instead of on the top. So we're talking about a parabola. It's got a 3-foot base. We're talking about a triangle. It's got an 8-foot base. And we're talking about a rectangle. Got an 8-foot base. Back on sheet 2A, I'm going to cheat here. Here's a parabola. The centroid of the parabola. You got a fat parabola. You got a skinny parabola. We're looking at the fat parabola, and therefore the centroid is going to be base times the power of the curve plus 1 divided by 2 times the power of the curve plus 4. So the distance from the fat end of the parabola will be its base, 3 feet, which we'll multiply times, it's an x squared curve, that's 2 plus 1, which will then divided by 2 times n, 2 times 2, 4, plus 4, is equal to, Kelly, my calculator, can you do that in your head?
Working on mine.
Working on it, huh? Let's see. 3 times 3 is 9/8. 9/8 of a foot. So what we're saying is, here's the centroid of the parabola, 9/8 of a foot back from the fat end of the parabola. And then, of course, the others are very simple. This one is in the middle because it's a rectangle. And the triangle, you'd be surprised how many of my students put the centroid at the third point. What do you think about that, Chris? Is that right? Third of the base. We have a freeze frame on our end. Well, the problem with putting the centroid at the third point of the base, if you cut that little triangle out of a piece of cardboard and put a pin through it at the point where you see I put the dot, and then hold it up in the air, it ought to balance about that centroid. And obviously it won't, because there's a lot of cardboard over on the right-hand side of that dot. So the guy who put the third point centroid on that piece of the triangle got it at the wrong third point. If you're going to stick a pin through that, the point ought to be down on this end of things, not that third. So, when we're talking about distances, we're going to give this guy 4 feet because he's in the middle. And when we're talking about distances, we're going to give this guy an 8/3 of a foot. Alright, now then, if I was asked to find a single point at which I could replace the loads under discussion at the one single point, then what I would do is I would find out how much tendency these forces have to rotate about any point. Most convenient probably is the left end. So I'd say the real loads have some tendency to roll about that point, and if I want to replace them with a single force, then what I ought to do is I ought to have the single force have the same tendency to roll about that point. So I'm going to calculate how much tendency to roll each of these guys have. First off, there is the parabola force. The parabola force has an area under the curve called area fat, and the area under A1 is the base. What was the base, Kelly? I'm going to have to keep flipping this thing back. 3 feet, thank you. 3 feet times the height. 300 pounds of force per foot times 300 pounds per foot is the height of the figure. We then multiply that times n is the power of the curve, that's a 2, divided by n plus 1, that's 2 plus 1. So we're talking about a load under that piece of 600 pounds of bananas, or whatever we're talking about. In the real world, those forces are distributed. If you'd like to lie about it temporarily and put those forces at a single point, then you ought to put them, the 600 pounds, at 9/8 from the center. So I put 600 pounds. The force under the rectangular part is simply base times height, area under a rectangle, which is equal to base is 8 feet, height is 300 pounds per foot, and that comes out 2,400 pounds of bananas. Put it right here. Now, one of the common mistakes a student will make, in my class anyway, is when he goes for the area of the triangle, he's going to say 1/2 base height. That's if he's one of my better students. If he's not, he'll just say base times height. 1/2 base height, what he normally will do is he'll take the height, this 700 pounds per foot, because it sure looks like that's what it says. He forgets the fact he's already taken into account the 300 pound per foot block upon which this thing sits. So we're talking 1/2 of the base, 8 feet times the height. It's not 7, take away 3, 400 pounds per foot. And I'll let you read it to me, Kelly.
1,600.
Thank you. 1,600 pounds. So what we're really talking about is we're talking about a stick tending to roll about its left end under the action of a 600-pound force, a 2,400-pound force, and a 1,600-pound force. A little free body like that will serve you well. Dimensions. Well, this is 3 feet, from which we take away 9/8 of a foot, leaving us with 1 7/8 of a foot. What's 7/8? 0.875?
Yes.
So we're talking 1.875 feet. The moment arm for the 2,400-pound force is 3 and 4. That's 7 feet. And the moment arm for the triangle is 8, 9, 10, 11 feet. Take off 8/3 of a foot. What does that give me? Yeah.
Leaves you 8.33.
8.33 feet. So what I'm really asking is, at which distance will a single load of 600 plus 2,400 plus 1,600, at what distance would that single force have to be placed to cause the same tendency to roll about the left end as the current set of forces? 600 plus 2,400 plus 1,600 equals 24, 34, 40, 4,600?
Correct.
4,600 pounds of force. And the distance is found from the equation. What you're going to do now is sum moments about the left end and set that sum equal to 0. It's equal to 600 pounds times his tendency to roll, 1.875, plus a 2,400-pound force has a tendency to roll 7 feet, plus a 1,600-pound force has a tendency to roll 8.33 feet. From that, I'm going to subtract the resulting force, the 4,600-pound force, and I'm just going to pretend it is backing up against all these other guys, minus 4,600 pounds, the sum of the forces times, I don't know, but at just the right distance so that the sum of all the tendencies to roll comes out 0. And solve for x, which Kelly says is?
X is equal to 31,258 divided by
oh, okay.
4,600.
Oh, okay, because I'm going to say, a lot of times my students tell me that, and I say, could that moment arm really be the distance to the moon? What do you get?
Let's see.
Pressure.
Hang on.
Pressure. You did pass this exam.
Correct.
Okay. And the number isn't that important, obviously. It's making sure you see what's going on here.
.797.
What'd you get, Chris?
6.795.
All right, thank you. 6.751062113. Did you say? Probably a little more accuracy than we need. All right. Now then, let's try this one. If you got a question, you might have to really holler, because there is a delay on sound. It's on page 5A. The idea is very similar. I feel surely that the loads are probably somewhat more complex than we'll have on the quiz, but who knows? And if you would, Kelly, give me a not-so-wide marker. I'm going to see if we can still see it on the other end. This one's too wide to get much done with. How about a red one so they can see?
Here's a red one right here.
Thank you. All right, let's see if I can see this. Then I'd rather use it because it's if you can see it anyway. First off, I'm going to tell you where these centroids are because I'm just going to cut them out of cardboard and I'm going to stick them where I think I could put the pin and the little figure should balance about that point. How about right about there, you think? I don't think so. That's about where we're talking about. Right about there. Centroid on that one. Down on a fat end. Alright.
Okay.
Now I'm going for the area of these pieces. Chris, can you see my writing on here? Yeah. If you can't see something, Chris, give me a holler, would you? My point man. Area is equal to base times 15 feet times 800 pounds per foot. That's a good start. If it was a rectangle, it would even be right. Then I go to my figures and I find out how much that ought to be multiplied by because it's not a rectangle. And it says that the area is equal to N is the power of the curve. That's an x cubed curve, so I multiply it times 3 divided by N plus 1. That's 3 plus 1 is 4. So the area under that load is 3/4 base height. Jen, I'll just let you tell me, Kelly.
Okay, 108,000.
108,004, 00, plenty close, pounds. In other words, it's 108 kips. All right. If I'm going to go to kips, this guy is 8 times. If I'm going to go to kips, this guy is 9 kip feet. And this
Hey, can we hold up for a second, Lee?
yes, sir.
9,000 in the answer.
Hey.
I'm not sure. Are we getting audio from him?
It would be 9 kips for that first equation.
What did he say, Chris? You're
I agree.
Survey.
9 kips.
9 kips?
9 kips.
All right. 15 times 0.8 is about 10. 10 times 3/4 is 108. Come on, Kelly.
9,000. That's right.
That's okay. I sure am glad you're making these mistakes because that enables me to look clean here. All right. It did seem a little out of proportion to the others, didn't it? That's probably a pretty good sign, too. All right. Now we're going for, rather than a fat parabola, we're going for the skinny side of the parabola. According to the page 2A, skinny parabolas have an area, base times height, divided by the power of the curve. This one happens to be a second order curve, plus 1. So the amount of load we're talking about under the skinny parabola is 8 feet times the height, 0.6 kips per foot. Move the decimal down 3 places here, divided by 3.
1.6.
Thank you. 1.6 thousand pounds of load. 1.6 kips. All right. Now then, I need to know where these loads can be replaced. Well, over on the parabola, I guessed it was right in that area, kind of where the fat part of the parabola is. According to sheet A2, the centroid of a fat parabola, or a fat cubic, or a fat any power curve from the fat end of the figure is its base times n plus 1 divided by 2n plus 4. For us, that's 15 feet times the power of the curve is 3 plus 1 is 4 divided by 2 times the power of the curve is 5 plus 4.
Okay,
Whoops, 6. Wait, I'm sorry, I wrote you wrong. 2 times 3
My mic on now.
6 plus 4. Makes it come out a lot nicer. 6, I love it. 6 feet. Gotcha. Swoop, 6 feet out of 15 feet leaves me with 9 feet. Okay. Now then for the centroid of the x squared curve. That's my voice I hear in there. Yeah, well, I kept wondering who was talking when I was talking. Now I know it's me. Right. Alright, the area, I got the area, the base, this dimension right across here is the base, 8 feet, times power of the curve is 2 plus 1 divided by 2 plus 2. 8 over 4 is 2, 2 times 3 is 6 feet, so this is 6 feet and 2 feet. The purpose for finding all these, of course, is so that we can solve for the reactions. Knowing the reactions, we can then draw the shear and moment diagram. Knowing the shear and moment diagram, we can design the beam. Here are our reactions.
Shear moment diagram? What?
Call that point A, B, C, D, E, F. Now I could sum moments about any point on that figure in order to get a equilibrium equation. But the smart point some moments about is going to be through one of the unknowns. For example, like the reaction at B. Since I don't know the reaction at B, if I'll some moments about that point, that unknown will drop out of the equation. Here is the reaction at E. All right. Some moments, point B, on anything but an airplane, equals 0. I take my 9 kip force, I include it in my equation. I multiply it times how far it is away from the point I'm summing moments about. 6 feet. I'm going to come over here and pick a sign convention, say right-hand rule. I'm going to call that a positive tendency to rotate. Next, I see there's an 8 kip force acting on the structure. It's 8 feet away from the point I'm summing moments about. Its tendency to roll, were it to get away from you, it would roll not right-hand rule. It would come down like this and roll not that way. So that's a minus tendency to roll. Next, I have a 9 kip foot moment. Up to now, everybody got multiplied times a moment arm. This guy doesn't need a moment arm. He was born a moment. He's ready to roll. Minus. Next, I see the reaction at E. He is 10, 20, 28 feet away from my moment point. He would roll clockwise. And finally, minus 1.6 kips times his moment arm, 8 and 10 and 10 and 8, 36 feet. Somebody sees me make a mistake. Holler at me. 10, 20, 30,
33.
6. Ooh, ouch. Thank you. One equation, one unknown. Solve for R sub E. Whether or not we do it now or not is a little consequence. Do it on a quiz, it's of a lot of consequence. Get that reaction wrong, of course, it's pretty much all over. What do you think the answer is, Kelly? Working on it? All right, while you're doing that, I'm going to sum moments about point E. The reason I'm going to do that is, rather than sum forces vertical, is if the reaction at E comes out wrong, and you sum forces vertical at this time, then you won't know you've made a mistake. But if you'll sum moments about point B first, and write down an answer for R sub E, and then sum moments about R sub E, and write down what you think the answer is for R sub B, you can add those two forces together, and the sum of the forces vertical provides a check for you. So, sum moments about E is equal to 0 is equal to minus 1.6 kips times 6 feet minus 9 kip feet. He doesn't have a moment arm. Plus 8 kips times his moment arm of 20 feet minus the reaction at B times his moment arm of 10, 20, 28 feet, and plus the 9 kip times his moment arm, 10, 20, 28, 34 feet. Huh. Same as that other guy. And I can solve for the reaction at B. Anybody got me an answer for R sub B? We think 2.62. What do you guys think? Great.
By a little bit.
Anybody get my answer? Yes. All right.
Oh, 2.62 kips.
I have to pull up my calculator here, Kelly. All right. Minus 1.6 times 6 minus 9 plus 8 times 20 plus 9 times 34 is equal to, divided by 28. I'm getting 15.98 for the other one. And now then, let's see if it works. Sum forces vertical equals 0. 2.62 up plus 15.98 up minus 9 down minus 8 down minus, where's that guy, 1.6 down Looks about right. 15.98 plus 2.62 minus 9 minus 8 minus 1.6 equals close enough. If it's not, of course, then you've got, there's no sense in designing the beam for the guy without the right reactions on it. Now, if you say, boy, this is way back to the beginning, I'm not sure I needed this much review. You're really good at this, that's great. But you know, it doesn't take much of this stuff to review what you really know about it, and a little bit of review in this area goes a long way. Don't feel bad. Alright, let's see where we're going. This also works nicely for trucks. That's my speaker. I'm covering up my speaker with the trash.
When you're figuring out this one? Yeah. Is that a positive 9,000 or a negative? This one's a negative. Well, it depends on how you order it. What's the negative on this one? When you're figuring out? Yeah, but see, it depends on what you make in positive direction. If you make this positive, and you're looking, if you put a force there, it's going this way. It's rotating in the negative direction.
Oh, I hear some good discussions going on in there. I hear forces going down
What would the answer you got?
this way, and that other one goes the other way, and this resists. Good stuff. All right. A truss would work in exactly the same fashion as a beam. Trusses are pretty handy. A lot of the quizzes seem to have trusses on, mostly for design of the steel members or connections, or possibly for wood trusses or speed up problems along those lines. It has the same tendency to roll about any point, and in our world it cannot be permitted to do so. So a set of forces will result which will not allow the structure to move. Due to these little rollers, there will be a vertical force at E, but no horizontal force. Over at A, there will be a reaction at A vertical and a reaction at A horizontal. Those forces will be required to keep it from moving around. I wouldn't sum forces vertical first. There are two unknowns in that direction. So it would be a good equation, an honest equation, a legal equation, but it wouldn't be a useful equation. Sum of the moments is always the most powerful equation you've got. Two unknowns come through point A, and therefore that's where I'm going to sum moments about. Watch out for these little guys. Several of them I've seen, they stick them up there on the top. They'll redo this. And they're hardly noticeable. And they certainly do change the answers. Alright, a little quicker this time. Sum moments A equals 0 equals. Kelly? I tell you what, I'll just rewrite it down here. Sum moments A equals 0 equals 60 kips. He is 50 feet away from the point we're summing moments about. You always take the perpendicular distance between the force, tie a piece of string to it, however long that string is to just get to the force, 50 feet. That's the moment arm. It's not that slanted distance for a moment arm. 60 kips times 50 feet. It is a counterclockwise tendency to roll. I'd probably call that a negative tendency to roll. Next, I see a 30 kip force His moment arm, 6 at 40 feet. 1, 2, 3 40-foot distances, 120 feet. Next, I see a reaction at E vertical plus the reaction at E vertical times his moment arm, 1, 2, 3, 4 40-foot panels.
160.
160, okay, but just about 40 times 4. I already got committed to the 40 there. And minus 20 kips times his moment arm, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 40-foot panels, 240 feet. One equation, one unknown. I can solve for the reaction at E vertical. And I already worked that rascal out. But I didn't put it on the picture, so tell me what that is too, Kelly.
I've got 47.5.
47.5, and we'll wait for comments. 47.5 kips. Alright, if I was taking this quiz, I'll tell you what I would really do. I'd sum moments about E to find this other reaction. And the reason I'd do that is then I'd have a check by summing forces vertical and making sure that the two reactions were correct. Probably now I'm just going to take my chances and write E vertical down. 50 kips down and 47.5 kips up. This guy here should be 2.5. And sum forces horizontal will tell me what this guy is, the reaction at A horizontal.
Okay, this is incorrect.
Oops, all right. What does Simpson say? 71.25. Okay. And so this isn't 2.5 kips up. We got 50 kips down. I got 71.25 up. 50, 71, so this is 21.5. And the reaction goes the other way. 21.25 kips. That makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of clockwise moment due to the 60 kip moment force. Alright, sum force horizontals equals 0 is equal to plus 60. There isn't anybody else except this, minus RA horizontal. Zoom. There we go. And therefore this guy here is 60 kips. So we're using the same principle on a truss as we used on a beam. In other words, we're trying to find the reactions on the beam before we start drawing a shear and moment diagram, or before we start trying to solve for the forces inside the truss. Alright, now, once you start going for the forces inside the structure, here's the rule. If you want the force in member AB, it'll be your job to cut through member AB. You just, with your mind, you take a saw and you whack through the member. Then you continue on cutting on through the structure and on around either end that you like until you get a little cloud that everybody calls a free body, and you make everything inside that free body sit still. So let me show you, for example, the kind of cutting we're going to do. If I have asked to find the force or design member AB, I would cut through member AB. I would then go ahead and cut around the end of the structure and include everything in there. I would not go on up to the top of the structure and cut through 5 or 6 other people, getting back to where I'm going. I'd close that free body, cutting as few new members as I possibly could. Because every member you cut introduces another unknown into the free body. Now this little piece you see in the cloud, that's a great free body. I would then show you a tensile force in member AB and a tension pulling force in member in AH and AB. I really recommend, after seeing a lot of students make a lot of mistakes, show them all tension. If the answer comes out with a minus sign once you're through, then it simply means that guy was not in tension. But it makes it very easy to keep up with what direction the forces are going in. Alright, here's what I would tell you we would cut if we were going to find Charlie John, CJ. I'd cut it. Now then, trying to get out of this structure as cheap as possible, I avoid member JD, because now I'm just cutting air. Well, now I don't have much choice. I'm going to have to go ahead and cut another member CD, and you're welcome to isolate the right end or the left end. It doesn't matter. On around the structure, and now you unfortunately had to cut IJ, and everything inside of there is your free body. Show IJ as a tensile force. Show JC as a tensile force. Show CD as a tensile force. Totally ignore the left side of the structure. And that's a beautiful free body. It will be your job to take all forces that you see, including the 3 you cut, and make that piece of steel or that piece of truss sit still. You'll do it with the only equations you have available. Some moments about any point you like equals 0. Some forces vertical is equal to 0. Some forces horizontal equals to 0. Alright. Let's say I did indeed, on page 9A, want to solve for the force in member AH. Here we go with member AH on page 9A. You'll see that I cut the little steel pin at A out of the structure, and I have now shown 3 forces. The reaction at A, which has been found as 21.25 kips, and the force AB and the force AH, which are unknown. Now, this picture is called the method of joints because you isolated a single joint out of the structure. The method of joints is very limited.
The RAH. Keep going to RAH.
RAH? Here it is right there.
That's what
Turn that camera off for a minute there, Kelly, till I get this thing shown on there. No, I'm just kidding. What'd you do, really turn it off? You took me at my word, huh? Okay, 2 mistakes. But you're sure right. Or if those reactions don't show up in these free bodies. Let me mention something on taking this quiz. Dan Turner knows a lot about this. I think he's one of the people who helps make them out. And I've kind of gotten the thought from listening to a lot of talk that on the multiple choice quizzes, you're just going to have to be very careful and very accurate. Because all you're going to do is put a spot on a piece of paper and it's either right or wrong. On the ones where they are going to grade your work, you still have a chance. In other words, if you forget the 60 kip load on the member, you're going to lose some points. Then the guy's going to say, okay, taking this as the right force in this member, let's see if you made any more mistakes. So I'd say that the level of care with details is probably going to have to be a little higher when you just put spots on the page for the answers. Another thing that he didn't mention is after you take the quiz, if you do not pass it, if you pass it you can care less, You do have the right to know your grade. You can ask them for that. You can also ask them to let you see your quiz so you get a feel for whether or not you were very close. And I think you even have the right, if you really think somebody didn't do a real good job of grading, to complain about it. And they'll listen to you, so you probably want to think about that. All right, I am getting ready to sum forces in the horizontal direction. That sum should equal to 0 is equal to. How many forces do you see push horizontally?
Three.
One of them I don't care. I can live with this guy, you notice. That still leaves two unknowns in this equation. I don't like this equation. It's a good equation, it's an accurate equation, it's just not a profitable equation. I say we sum forces in the vertical direction first. Sum of the forces in the vertical direction is equal to. Now if you'll check the drawing, you'll see that member AH goes between two joints that are 40 feet apart horizontally, 50 feet apart vertically, and then you simply take the hypotenuse is equal to square root of 40 squared plus 50 squared. You get the hypotenuse. So what that means is you can write down AH's component really fast. Sum forces vertical equals 0 equals minus 21.25 kips is acting down. RA horizontal has no vertical component. AB has no vertical component. AH has some. Plus AH. Except not all of AH points up. Only 50 out of 64.03 acts up. And that gives me the answer for AH. AH is equal to plus 21.25 times 64.03 over 50. 27.21, thank you. The plus sign means you guessed the arrowhead correctly. The arrowhead does not truly mean the member's intention. It doesn't really mean it's an impression. It just means that whichever way you selected the arrowhead, you guessed it right. So this is 27.21 kips. And it does prove to be tension because we guessed the tension to begin with. Now then, our sum forces horizontal equation is useful. Minus 60 kips plus the force in member AB.
27.21, but
Anybody else get 27.21?
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thought I heard a little grumbling there. Plus 27.21 kips. Except not all of that number points horizontal. Only this much of it. 40 out of 64.03. 40 out of 64.03. And then you solve for the force in member AB. AB is equal to plus 60 minus 27.21 times 40 over 64.03 is equal to
43.00.
Okay, not enough to count. 43 kips. Did you get a plus sign for this answer?
Is that what you got?
All right, yes, plus sign. That means the arrowhead is correct. That means that it's 43 kips of tension as shown. .00. Now that's called method of joints. Because you isolated a mere joint out of the structure. Now, let me show you a free body of a joint. Here's a guy who was asked to solve for the force in member EJ. So he cut through member EJ and isolated E, intending to use the method of joints. No way. So many unknowns. Looks like a spider's nest. We're going to have to get member EJ by some other method where we did not cut through so many unknowns in order to solve for the answer. Let's just go back and look at the original truss. If he wanted EJ, he did one thing right. He cut through member EJ. What he did wrong then was to go ahead and isolate joint E and cut another one unknown. That's known. Two unknowns. Three unknowns. He got four unknowns. Well, he's got five unknowns in the free body, one of which he wants. Not enough equations to do the job. So come on down and cut out a section of the structure. There's what we call the method of sections. The method of sections cuts an entire piece off of the structure. We show a tension force in KJ, tension force in member EJ, a tension force in member ED. Now, many of you probably a little better at this. You're going to say the member KJ is obviously in compression. I think I'll show it in compression to begin with. If you're careful with your signs, that's okay. But I really recommend if you show everything with tension, you may come out ahead. All right. Free body looks like... Well, I had one of those. Don't think so? Good enough. I'll use the one we had. It'll work very nicely. My point is to show you how, or remind you how, to solve for the force in member. Let's do each of those. In cutting through this free body, you expose three unknowns. KJ, EJ, and DE. Let's start off pretending that your quiz has asked you to solve for the force. Probably he didn't ask you to solve for the force. He asked you to design the connection in member J or KJ. To do so, you'll have to solve for that force. Well, if you want the force in KJ, and I'd suggest you kind of cover it up so you don't see what I'm getting ready to do to the rest of the forces. Any other unknown forces that are hanging out there, I really hate them. I don't mind RE. RE is equal to 71.25. I know him. I don't mind this guy. I know him. I really detest EJ and DE. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow them home. I notice that they meet at point DE. I'm sorry, point E. That's where I put the bomb. At point E. Now then, you see what dirty trick I pulled on them. They have no moment arms. I can sum moments about point E and they disappear from the equation. And I can pick off KJ.
32.
Oh, you already got me an answer. All right, 32 kips. Let's see how that works.
Yeah, let's see if that's right.
Sum moments E equals 0 equals KJ times his moment arm of 50 feet. His tendency to roll, were he to get away from me, he's pointed this way, he would roll about point E, counterclockwise, right-hand rule. I'll call that moment a plus. Next, EJ. Booey on him, he doesn't have a moment arm. DE. Doesn't have a moment arm. 20 kips is the next guy. There's 20 kips times his moment arm. He is 2 40-foot panels away from point E, 80 feet. His tendency to roll about point E,
One thing you always want to do when you're
were he to get away from me, minus. And KJ, you already solved, Kelly, you said was
32.
32 kips of force. And on this side, plus, so that's a positive 32. Says the member is truly intentional. You can get any of them that way.
a negative answer.
Easy, fast. All right. How would you solve for the force in member DE? I would cover up the force in member DE and then do horrible things to all the other unknowns hanging out. I would follow EG until it went somewhere, because I really dislike EJ. I would follow KJ until it went down its line of action where those two people meet to have a beer. That's where I'll sum moments about that point. Then they'll neither one have a moment arm. Only the guy I'm looking for, DE, has a moment arm, and I can instantly solve for DE. So to solve for the force in member DE, I would sum moments about J equals 0 is equal to, some moments about J. First, I see a 71.25 kip force. His moment arm is 40 feet. A lot of people look at that and say, ooh, point J is outside the free body. That's acceptable. This piece of steel that is isolated in the free body shouldn't roll about point J, just like it shouldn't roll about point K. Shouldn't roll about any points. Ought to sit still. So it's okay to sum moments about a point outside the free body. Some people wonder, should we bring the 30 kip force into the equations now that we are directly below point J? Well, the answer to that is no, because the 30 kip force is not inside the free body. Okay, so moments about J is equal to 71.25 kips times a 40-foot moment arm. And then we see a 20 kip force There's a 20 kip force. His moment arm is about J. 1, 2, 3 40-foot panels. 340 is 120 feet. His tendency to roll, should he get away from me, is negative. And finally we have the unknown KJ. His tendency to roll about, oops, that's no good. He goes through point J. Must not be the unknown I'm looking for. Here we go. DE. Thank you. DE times his moment arm. DE has a moment arm of 50 feet. And that's everything. So I can solve for the force in member DE.
Comes out to be 9
9.
kips.
Right on the money, huh? 9 kips of force. Does it turn out to be a plus sign?
Yes.
So that means the arrowhead was correctly guessed. It is a tensile force. Just that easy.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Couldn't you have just gone back to the down point method of joint?
Hang on a second. How can we cut out that cutting out?
You just need to talk slower.
All right, sir. He needs to talk slower,
Yeah, talk more distinctly.
more distinctly. All right. Try again.
Well, okay. What I was wondering is, couldn't you have gone back to method of joints about E, get DE and EJ that way?
Certainly can. You can use the method of joints and nothing else. Here's the only problem with the method of joints. First off, by cutting out this joint around point E, we see there's so many unknowns we're just pretty much doomed. So we're going to have to go somewhere where there's no more than 2 unknowns come into the joint before you can begin. Now the closest point is point G. Point G would be perfectly acceptable, and if you're careful, you get the right answer for this member and the right answer for this member. Of course, if you make a little mistake, one of those will be wrong. You could then go to joint F and cut it out. Knowing the answer in this member right here, FG, you could then solve for the member force here and the member force here. If you're careful, you'll even get them right. Knowing this force, and you see what's happening, don't you? I mean, I've already made 2 or 3 mistakes you guys have found, so I don't have a lot of chance of getting there with no mistakes, because now I got to come up to joint L to get this one, and then I move over to this one to get this one, and then we can do method of joints at point E to get EJ. It's a long, drawn-out process. If the guy asks you for the design of member JE, it'll be well worth your time to use the method of sections and go for it directly. You'll really find much easier to work that way. All right. See if I don't have. We got one of these that isn't all scratched on, Kelly. I've got a bunch behind you. Here we go. Hand me that one right there. Thank you. All right. Let's just jump into the middle. We're not going to actually do the equations now, but I just flat want to say that the quiz says, please solve for the force in member Charlie Dog. Here's my free body. And if I come over here and cut through these members, see how I cut 3 members? So instead I'm going to cut through here, because that's only cutting 2 members. The fewer members you cut, the fewer unknowns that are involved in your free body. I have exposed IJ. I have exposed CJ. I have exposed CD. The gentleman asked me on the quiz to solve for the force in member Charlie Dog. Therefore, I cover CD up. I follow IJ and CJ until they meet at point J. And here's the rule. To solve for CD, sum moments about J equals 0. Just that quick, just that easy. One equation, there'll only be one unknown in it, and you're on your way. To solve for IJ. I ask you to solve for IJ because I've obviously already got the free body drawn. What would I do, Chris? How would I solve for I? Huh?
One of the moments around C.
Excellent. You want IJ, you hate CD, you hate CJ, you follow them until they meet at a point, you sum moments about C. How would I solve for the force in CJ? If you like CJ, who do you hate?
IJ and CD.
IJ and CD. Let's simply follow them until they meet at a point. Uh-oh. We got a problem now, don't we?
No, I'm going to put...
No, that's right. That's right. Since IJ, who you hate, goes horizontal, and since CD, who you hate, goes horizontal, you can get around them by simply summing forces in the vertical direction. Again, they have no components in the vertical direction. They can't come to that equation. So our equation would read, sum forces vertical equals 0 is equal to, I'm not going to include this force. It's not in my free body. I'm not going to include this force. It's not in my free body. Not going to include that force. It's not in my free body. RA vertical is 21.25 kips. It gets in my equation. And I guess other than CJ, who I'm looking for, it's about the only guy. Minus 21.25 kips plus CD. I always recommend that you write this down. I see minus 21.25, I write it down. I see CD pointing up, so you write him down. The fact that it's not quite right, I mean, it's better than nothing. And then you correct it. Simply say, well, not all of CD goes up.
CJ.
Oh, thank you. CJ. Yep, CJ. Thank you. Not all of CJ goes up. Only his component goes up. This was 40. This was 50. This was 64.03. Only 50/64ths of it goes up. Only 50/64.03ths of it goes up. And you're through. It's a beautiful method. Alright. Page 13. Quick and easy. How do I solve for the force in DF? Volunteers. How do I solve for the force in DF? What'd they say, Chris?
That to DF DG and EG.
That's right, I hate
Three-body diagram.
I hate DG and I hate EG, and I therefore some moments about G. Just that easy. How do I solve for the force in IK?
HJ, IJ, and IK. Solve for moments about J.
Beautiful. Some moments about J. How do I solve for the force in member GH?
You've got FH, GH, I, and some forces in the Y direction because the other two will cancel out.
Excellent. Exactly right. You dislike FH. You dislike GI. You follow them until they meet at a point. When they're not willing to do that for you, some force is perpendicular to their direction, be it vertical or horizontal, and then they will drop out of your equation. Now there's a few of them you can get in a hurry, like joint C. Joint C, you can find the answer in a hurry because you draw a free body of joint C. There are three unknowns that come into the joint, but only one of them resists the force. Some of the forces horizontal won't get you an answer. There's too many unknowns. But some forces vertical tells you immediately. BC 60 kips. Same way with joint K. Since the only guy resisting the 60 kip force at K is JK, members IK and KL being unwilling to help, got to be 60 kips. That also works for member FG. FG is 4 kips compression. That does not work at joint D, because at joint D there are 2 people helping you hold up the 4 kip load, and I can't just draw a joint at D and get an answer.
This one's going down. That one has to go up. So that would be 10. Yes.
All right. Now, let's see. Enough about trusses. Let's try a frame. Frame's on page 16. Frames work very similar to truss. The only difference is their members have bending inside of them. Truss members have no bending. They are pinned at both ends and loads are applied only at the ends, and therefore their forces run right down the axis of the members. In any kind of a frame, many of the loads will be transverse to the members, including the applied loads, like this one's got 500 newtons of force on it, and also the pin, Baker dog, or the pin at B, applies a force transverse to the axis of member AC. That's why it's called a frame instead of a truss. It has bending inside of the members. In that case, The forces are solved by what they call the method of members. Method of members simply means instead of separating out a joint from the structure, method of joints, or separating out a chunk of the structure, a section, method of section, you separate the members themselves, method of members. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on another piece of paper, draw you a free body of member AC. I'm going to draw you a free body of member CE, and then draw a free body of member BD. Now what that does is it gives me more free bodies to put in equilibrium, and therefore gives me enough equations to solve for all the forces. If it's possible, you want to go ahead and get any forces you can using the original structure. You'll notice at the pin at A you see two forces, AX and AY unknown. You'll notice over at the roller at E there's only a single force, EY. Therefore I could sum moments about point A and give you an answer for EY right now. Using the whole structure, I would say sum moments about point A equals 0 equals 2. I'd put the 500 Newton force multiplied times his moment arms, 16 meters. I'd call that tendency to roll a negative number. I would then add EY times his moment arm, 8 is 16, 18, 28, 36 meters. There are no other forces acting on the original free body, and so I can solve for EY.
222.2.
To 22.2 newtons of force. Now then I can sum forces in the vertical direction is equal to 0 plus AY minus 500 plus 222.2 and solve for AY. Go ahead.
277.8.
Thank you. 277.8. Now sometimes you won't be able to get those forces. Sometimes when you try and get them, there just won't be enough equations to cough up those answers. Doesn't matter. That just means that you'll have to go into these individual pieces to get the answers. Now, on joint A, I have found this answer. I'm going to write it down. 277.8. And I have not yet found this answer. I'll just leave it A sub x. At joint B, it's a pin. Pins have the ability to do horizontal and vertical forces both. So I'm going to show you a horizontal and a vertical force pulling on point B. And I tell you what I'm going to do, since I kind of committed on my notes, I already drew them on another picture. Let me show them pulling to the right and down. I have no idea which way they really go, and therefore I'm just guessing anyway, but on page 17 I'm already kind of committed to a direction. I would tell you this guy's name is the X component of the force. I'd tell you this guy's name is BY. I would come up to joint C and admit there's an unknown Charlie X force an unknown Charlie Y force, and those forces are at your discretion. I don't personally have any feel for which way they're really going to go, and therefore you just slap them on that member. But once you do that, you've committed yourself to sticking with that direction. For example, you said that somebody is pulling to the right on this member. The only way that can happen is if the person who's pulling is being pulled on to the left. So you must put CX to the left on this member, because you put it to the right on the other member. So the rule is the force on the other member goes the other way. The CY force on this member was arbitrarily selected as down, and it must be shown the other way on the other member. CY must be shown up. If you show them down on both of them, well, then the equations can't cough up the right answers for you. Alright, now I'm going to look at this horizontal member. I say that I'm going to show the horizontal force on that member which way? I'm going to show the horizontal member on that force which way? To the left. It absolutely has to be to the left. You do not have an option. BX. I'm going to show BY down. Up. Ah, very good. It must be up. I'm going to show DY. I have to show DY up. True or false? Any way you like. That's good. You're not committed to a direction yet. I choose to draw it up just because I dang well please. But I don't have to. And I'm going to show DX horizontally to the right just because I feel like it. Now let's go to the slanted member, CDE. DY must be shown down. DX must be shown to the left. Whoa, that's not point A. Let me transfer those forces where they belong. DY. I wonder if there's any way I can blame that on Kelly. Hey, might as well blame it on Chris. Alright. Hey Chris, which way am I going to put this EY force? Up. Okay, now let's see. Up. I don't know about that now. I see you have it shown up here, so shouldn't we show it the other way? No. He's not sure why, but he knows it's right. Well, you're right. If it's up on this member, this is the same member. It's got to be shown the same way. Got to be shown up. It's not the other member. It's the same member redrawn. Now, if you had a ditto machine or a Xerox machine that every time a copy came off, you flop the error the other way. But that's not the case. If you just redraw member Charlie, Dog, Edward, that's the same member. You must show that force the same way as you showed it a minute ago. Alright. Let's go to page 17 where these things have been shown.